Like millions of women, writer Ann West Moss is more than familiar with the grief of pregnancy loss and infertility. Her wise and moving memoir, Flesh and Blood, follows her journey through multiple miscarriages, an emergency hysterectomy, and eventually to a deeper understanding of life, kinship, and legacy. Candid and often humorous, Moss wrote Flesh and Blood to allow others in the same situation to feel seen and heard in a way that she often did not.
When the D&C is over, Craig and I go home to await the pathology report to find out what is happening to my body. It takes some time, a week maybe, and all that week while we await results, the only pain I feel is from where some orderly ripped the tape off my arm to take out the IV needle. In fact, even months later, after everything unfolds, I will still have a scar from where the adhesive lifted off the delicate skin inside the crook of my elbow. It will be the only scar I'll ever see from this or from anything that is about to happen to me, and provide some sort of tangible evidence that anything ever happened to me at all.
Ann West Moss is also the author of The Subway Stops at Bryant Park, a collection of poems, essays, and short fiction. Her writing has been published by Salon, McSweeney's, and the New York Times. For today's conversation, West is joined by Shelley Fidel, a psychotherapist with Missouri Baptist Health Center, specializing in pregnancy loss and infertility counseling.
Reading your beautiful book, Flesh and Blood, Reflections on Infertility, Family, and Creating a Bountiful Life. And I was so moved by so many parts of this book. I have to tell you, it really took me on my own journey back through experiences that I've had as both a patient and professionally working with women who have gone through what you have gone through and their journey to finding their way to wholeness. And to me, your book really just took me on such with a humor-filled way. I felt like I was right there with you and your mom and your grandmother, all the generations of women in your family as you went from the beginning of bleeding till the end of healing. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe what was the inspiration and really made you decide, I think I want to go put my memoir in writing?
I make sense of the world through my writing. And I guess that's what writers do in general. And for me, writing is a cathartic process. And so it would be very natural for me to want to write about this for myself. And then I also felt that there wasn't a lot of literature out there that spoke about infertility and hysterectomy and even menstrual bleeding.
Yeah.
In any kind of a frank way, the way friends would speak to one another. I felt that there was a real dearth of language for us to make sense of what was going on for us. And I say us because I started to do a little bit of research, and it turns out that I think it was the CDC says it's 600,000 women in America have hysterectomies a year. And that's just in America, 600,000. So there are millions of us around us who have gone through this, and yet nobody talks about it. So my first impulse was selfish and about catharsis and feeling better and making sense of what I was going through. And then I decided I really want to contribute to the language around it and do my small part to decrease the taboo around these discussions, because it's bad enough to go through this kind of thing, but then to feel like you have to go through it alone, or to feel ashamed about it, or to not know how to describe it to the people who love you. I think makes it harder.
Yeah. Well, and you just touched on so many things that, even that we don't talk about bleeding. We don't talk, I mean, even when young girls get their period for the first time,
Right.
there's like this hush hush.
Well, and that's what I want for girls and women and all of us, is to be able to be in our bodies and to be able to fully embrace our sort of embodied experience of the world. And this is a very large part of most women's lives, and no one writes about it. And in fact, I saw, you're not supposed to read your own reviews on Goodreads, but I did read one, and it was sort of half complimentary and half not. She said, I love the writing, but it's so graphic. I hope she'll write about something else. And I thought, that's because we are so uncomfortable that we can watch, CSI with dead bodies on the screen.
Right.
But if you talk about bleeding, or your uterus or your vagina, which has several chapters about, that's too much for people. But murder and all of that stuff that's all over TV is not too graphic. So I feel like let's change that. Let's make it okay, as much as we can.
And then the miscarriages, which are just, I think that's another thing that we don't talk about, or people want to say, well, how far along were you? And then they determine whether it's significantly far enough that you are entitled to be grieving. And to me, miscarriage, I don't care if you're 6 weeks, 16 weeks, 20, I mean, there's loss. And anytime there's loss, you're going to be grieving.
Well, yeah. And that's another thing. Like there's a whole protocol you're supposed to follow about pregnancy, about when do you tell people, and when, you don't tell them until after a certain time, so that it's more likely than not that you'll be able to carry it to term. But then if you don't tell people, nobody knows that you've been through something. And so again, there's all that sort of, how do I even let my friends know that we're going through this thing that's hard for us? And I know that it's differing levels of hard for everyone, and that different these affect everyone differently. I don't stand for everyone, but I really like the idea of being able to tell my friends and family what's going on in a frank way, that's just open and unashamed, so that we can go through it together. That's where I came down on it.
Yeah, because we're wired to connect with one another as humans.
I'm thinking about my husband. I don't think he knew how to talk about it either. So it's been nice for us, the two of us, to be able to, it's part of our marriage. And it's not our whole marriage. There's a lot, we have a great marriage. But it's, I feel for him that if we don't have language to talk about it, imagine how little language men have to discuss it with one another or anyone else. I don't know, but it seems like it would be a benefit for a lot of people to just be able to talk about it, and not have to hold it as this sort of secret. Intentionally and not so intentionally, this is a book that I've really wanted to invite men into. I don't want them to be walled off from this. And I know a lot of really good men who want to help, who have the instinct to help the women that they love. And I think those are the beautiful men. And I'm lucky enough to know a lot of them. So yes, I would say all the men in this book are just like most of the men out there, right? Who they care about the people they love, male or female, and want to be of use.
I love the relationship in the book that you show us of you and your mother. It's such a beautiful one. And I love when no matter how old we are, we need our moms and we want them there. And Craig, he's so wonderful and I love his support, but there was a time where he was upstairs and you and your mom shared the room downstairs.
Yeah.
And she took care of you.
It was great. Yeah. I mean, we're very close. And I would say that's because of her personality. She's an amazing person, and is close to all the kids in the family. You know, I'm the youngest of 4 and she's close to all of us. And it was amazing. You know, I think I wrote about this in the book that I'm 57 now. I was 52 or something when I was going through that, or 53, I forget. But it was great to have her there at that stage of my life. It was almost like I needed a refresher on how someone who really, really, really loves me would take care of me. Yeah. And I was sort of having a parallel experience. So on one hand, I was just a patient being taken care of in this really lovely way, but I was kind of taking mental notes too. Like, wow, she's making everything beautiful. She's taking the time to make this soup and to bring out my coffee. She brought out my coffee one day and my great-grandmother's egg cup. I mean, it was just adorable because I couldn't eat much. And so it was a really great relearning of how to care for myself. Not even when I'm sick, just in general, to make it all joyful and beautiful, and to be that kind of level of nurturing. Maybe that's partly why I wanted to write the book too, was to remember that all those lessons of caring for myself. You know, she's also my model for pragmatism, because we've always had very pragmatic conversations in our family about death, which I think is unlike a lot of families.
Yeah.
And health issues. So we talk about stuff like I'm her healthcare proxy. So we've had very detailed conversations where she'll call me up and give me instructions about, if this and this and this happens to me, don't let them intubate me. You know, like we have those conversations, which I love and value.
The idea that passing on the stories was so important to you, and that you didn't need to have children to be able to pass that along, and that we give birth to other things. We give birth to books. We give birth to that was really a neat thing. Before you started trying, you weren't sure necessarily that you wanted to have children. And then once you became pregnant, you fiercely felt, I do want to.
So weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
And that grieving process. And then, as we were talking about even before, when you were in the hospital and you're giving your history and you're having to, answer these questions over and over, and they're making sure of your date of birth. And then they said to you, one of the nurses said, how many surgeries had you had and how many DNCs? And you couldn't even remember at that point. And when she said, how many children do you have? And you said none, that was when she saw you. And that was really emotional for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think there are a couple of scenes similar to that where I was caught off guard by how someone else was reacting to my situation. And it caused me to sort of have this emotional response that I didn't expect and couldn't have predicted. And I think maybe it's like anyone's grief about anything, that you think it's linear. And so, okay, this thing, I had a breakup or someone I love has died. And now I'm going to grieve and then it's going to be over. And my feeling is it's not like that. My experience is it's not like that we come back around and we have these moments of all of a sudden feeling things really deeply, unexpectedly. So that moment was, I was going in for this DNC because we could not stop my bleeding. And, I'd been separated from Craig, who had to wait in the waiting room, and I had to fill out all this paperwork, and they kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And it is such a weird, our healthcare system is weird. And it's very bureaucratic. And it's also a little bit combative. Yeah, for lack of a better word. It feels sometimes as a patient like we are a problem for the people who are taking care of us.
Yeah.
They need to hurry up and they need to get certain things done, and they can't sit around and they have to fill out forms. And so it feels like we're not on the same page. Like, I want you to love me and take care of me.
Yeah.
And they have these very real different concerns. We have to get through things and fill out these checklists and get you in and out of here fast. And so I was having that, I was having a very emotional thing was going on for me. I'd been in the emergency room and I was sick, and she was feeling very distant and sort of angry, this particular nurse, like she was having a bad day is what it felt like. And then all of a sudden, when she was sort of unpacking my situation through the questions that she had to ask, and realized, oh, she's had all of these miscarriages and DNCs, so many she can't remember exactly how many, and doesn't have any kids. So then she got very emotional, which pissed me off, honestly. Because now I was sitting there all in my Zen place, breathing and picturing Craig and all the things to try and make it okay, because I was about to be put under for the DNC. Then she got really personal and emotional, and she looked like she was going to cry. And then I thought, so it just was complicated. There the poor woman is just trying to get through her day, no malice in her heart, but it's complicated taking care of patients, I think. And it was almost I felt almost too seen in a way. Like I just wanted to, pity's the worst for me, as far as I'm concerned. Pity's the absolute worst thing anyone can ever do. I don't want your pity. And I think that's what it went from her being officious to being pitying. So neither one of those worked so well for me. And then I had to go be put under 2 seconds later. So it was one of those moments that just caught me by surprise, and was kind of icky, but not that bad. I survived.
You survived. And empathy is tough. I feel like, or sometimes they're trying to be empathic people, and instead they say the wrong thing, like the woman who said to you, were you blessed with children? And she wasn't trying to be rude, but like the things that people can say can really
say a lot of amazingly tone deaf things. And yes, most people are. I have a great neighbor who has 5 kids, and we joke because she said people give her a hard time for having 5 kids, and they give me a hard time for having 0 kids. And so I guess we're just going to lead our lives.
Yeah.
Like these are our lives. What else do we have? And people are going to judge us no matter what we do. But yes, people say, that particular woman you mentioned also said, well, why don't you adopt a dog?
Yeah.
I don't even know you. I don't even remember her name. Like, that's, I don't know. But through all these experiences, I was just thinking about that nurse who we're talking about. I guess if we live through enough things, we become much better people, because I feel like each of those experiences has been a cautionary tale to some extent, has made me less annoying, I hope. Right? Like I don't ask, there are questions I ask and there are questions I don't ask. And I've learned that through figuring out what works for me and what has caused me pain. So I'm better at talking to people who are sick or who are grieving, I think, than I used to be, certainly, because it's like I think I broke someone's heart before I knew how bad it was to get your heart broken, right? And then I got my heart broken, and I don't think I've done it since. So it's the same thing. Like, being sick, I think, made me a better person.
And when the time when you're in it, it's so hard to see that. And I don't even know that you can until years later, and you look back and look at the way your life has changed as a result of what you went through.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just, like I've learned not to ever put myself in the center of that circle, right? When someone's sick and someone's grieving, let them be there, right? Let them be the person in need. Let them be the person with the story. I don't have to rush in with my story, and I don't have to judge. And it's, so you're right. I've gotten, I guess, is that what maturity is?
I don't, yes.
I'm getting mature.
As we approach 60, we're going to be really mature 60-year-olds, right?
Yeah. I'm going to be so mature. I'll be one of the grown-ups maybe eventually. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, when you went to Holland, I was literally starting to have anxiety for you as I'm reading that you're lost and it's raining and you don't know where you're going. And then as you have your panic attack, I'm feeling my heart rate increase as I'm reading it. I'm like, what is she going to do? Like, what do you do? I just was like, oh no. And part of me wanted you to get on the plane and fly home. And then I was so happy you didn't.
Well, me too. Me too. Yeah. I mean, that is the one and only panic attack I've ever had in my life.
Oh.
And that's given me some sympathy for people who have panic attacks. But, it was also the best thing that could have possibly happened to me, that trip. Being away from home and getting perspective on my life, and also being comfortable is not all it's cracked up to be. I know we spend our lives trying to build a world for ourselves that's comfortable, right? Where we have everything we need. But being outside of that in Holland was one of the most invigorating experiences of my life. And, boy, oh boy, did I get a lot out of it. And I think partly because it was stressful, because it wasn't comfortable. Being in Holland, like just having to focus really, really hard on the street so that I could get from where I was staying, because I was kind of plunked down at a friend's house. For those of you who haven't read the book yet, I was house sitting in Holland just a few months after I had recovered from this surgery. So I was a little iffy still. And the amount of focus that I needed just to get from the house I was house sitting into the train in Eindhoven, that was a level of awareness that I hadn't experienced in a really long time, where I had to pay attention to everything around me or I would get lost. I didn't have it felt like I didn't have a safety net. And it kind of culminated in this. I got lost in Amsterdam in the middle of the night on a rainy, freezing night. And but look what happened. I mean, so many people helped me that night. And this beautiful cab driver who just stayed with me, and my friend Whitney, where I was allowed to just come. I slept in her bed with her in the hotel, and they had gin waiting for me in the lobby. And because I persevered, I was introduced to this Dutch author that I hadn't ever read before. And I was already conceiving of this book and thinking that I wanted to have these very short chapters, but it felt weird, and I was judging that impulse. And then I read this Dutch author while I was convalescent back at this house in Eindhoven. And that's exactly what he did. And I thought, I can write this however I want to write it. And so he became a big influence on this book. And a lot of great things came from it. And I feel like we should all be a little bit less comfortable sometimes. more often, maybe.
Yeah.
Comfort is nice, but being outside of our comfort zone is where all the growth happens, I think.
Yeah, I was just thinking resilience and grit. It's like you don't get that from staying in your cozy couch in your room and where you're safe.
There's nothing thrilling about being in my cozy bed. Now, I love my cozy bed.
Yes.
Do not get me wrong. I love it. And I love my home and I love my husband, but I like being fully alive too. And so sometimes I want to feel thrilled and excited as well. And that takes stepping outside of what I already know. I do reflect on that a lot. I didn't really decide to, although I've written my whole life, I didn't decide to pursue writing and publishing until after Craig and I pretty much decided I just cannot get pregnant again. This is too much for me. And so thinking, well, what I've had I work, but thinking what's going to provide meaning if I'm not going to have kids. I still had the creative impulse was sort of lit up in me by being pregnant so many times, and deciding I'm going to try this. I'm going to try it. And so I got my MFA at 49 and started. Yeah. And I thank goodness I did it, because while I've always loved to write, I really needed all of that craft stuff that I got. I loved it. And in fact, I'm still taking classes. I'm sitting in on a playwriting class right now because I'm working on a short play. So that doesn't end for me. But yeah, that was a decision at a later point in life to let's see if I can create something else. If it's not going to be kids, let me turn my energy somewhere else. I never felt like, I don't know what the option is. How do you give up? I don't know. But I still had a happy impulse about creating things. And that's what writing became for me, a conduit for that.
This has really been really nice.
Oh, Shelley, thank you so much. Your questions are so insightful. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I will look forward to when the book comes out in hardback, purchasing a copy and sharing it with friends. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.